Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Cam. Welcome back to the 1996 Project. And all that I have to say is, summer of 1996, I was not familiar with your game, and I sincerely apologize because, wow, the quality is just not stopping for a lot of these movies. But let's just get straight into it. If you like the video, leave a like, subscribe. I greatly appreciate that. The 1996 Project is where I review every movie that I possibly can from the year 1996. And we crossed the halfway point. We still got a lot more to go. So just no time for talk. Let's just get right into it. Starting off with this little action movie I had no idea existed, but was surprisingly fun. It's called Fled. Books and starred Lawrence Fishburne, Stephen Baldwin, and Will Patton. It tells the story of two prisoners who are attached via handcuff on a chain gang. After a commotion erupts, they escape. However, the prisoners have way more going for them than they're willing to let on. And over the course of the movie, you find out that Baldwin and Fishburne's character have ulterior motives, one of which involving a disc which contains information that could lead to millions of dollars. Never heard of this movie until this project, but when I saw Lawrence Fishburne on the cover, I'm like, well, he's at least going to be good in this. And I was surprised, because there's plenty to like here. Definitely not perfect, but there's definitely a lot to like here. And I think the biggest plus is the action. There's a lot of really good action scenes here. There's one involving motorcycles, and when I saw that, I said to myself, give it a few more years, and Lawrence Fishburne's going to be dealing with motorcycles, but in a much different movie. And there's also a great shootout in the Georgia Dome in Atlanta. That's a great one right there. There's one involving a cable car in Stone Mountain, Georgia. That's great. However, the best part of the movie acting-wise is Will Patton. He nearly steals the show. He definitely is cut from the Francis McDormand style of policeman, but he's great, and he comes across as the voice of reason in a story that's filled to the gills with corruption. And that's also kind of a problem, because this movie has way too much story for its own good. The movie's only about 90 minutes long, and it feels like it was supposed to be 2 hours, because you got Stephen Baldwin's character's motivation. He's the one that got the information onto the disc, which is worth the millions. Then you got Fishburne, who has his own agenda. Then you got Will Patton, who's trying to fight off moles from within the Attorney General's office, but also his own department. And then there's this whole thing where it just kind of collapses in on itself. It's a hat on top of a hat. Just cut out a lot of these story beats and just keep it simple, because really where the movie thrives is in the action department. It just feels a little too much, and it also feels derivative. It doesn't exactly help that they reference movies that it's kind of taking inspiration from. I was saying to myself, wait, prisoners running away from crimes they did not commit. The Fugitive would like to have a word. And then they directly reference The Fugitive. Like, literally, Stephen Baldwin's character goes, have you seen that movie, The Fugitive? Like, Fugitive wasn't released that long ago, right? It was 93. So I guess he watched it from Blockbuster. And then there's also a Godfather reference and a What's Love Got to Do with It reference, the Tina Turner biopic. I'm like, what is the weirdest references just all over this thing? But because of the strong action sequences, I am going to give this a good rating, but a high good rating. I won't go so far as to say it's underrated. It's definitely got problems that hamper my enjoyment, but there's enough quality here that I would give it a modest recommendation. But now we go from action to horror comedy and talk about the U.S. directorial debut of one Peter Jackson. It's The Frighteners.
Director Peter Jackson.
We don't stop till the screaming starts, you dig?
The Frighteners, like I said, was directed by Peter Jackson. We all know what he would go on to do starting 5 years from this point, and just changing blockbuster movies as we know it. But in 96, he was just the guy that directed Brain Dead. It starred Michael J. Fox, Trina Alvarado, and Jeffrey Combs, among others. It tells the story of a man named Frank Bannister, played by Michael J. Fox, who, after a car crash that ends up killing his wife, he ends up getting the ability to speak to the dead, specifically ghosts. And he turns into a bit of a grifter. He makes a deal with several of the ghosts to haunt houses to where he can come in and basically play Father Merrin and get paid. However, he runs into a very sinister ghost who doesn't want to play along. Jackson did such a great job with the Lord of the Rings movies that it's kind of hard to think that he ever did anything else before this, or before Lord of the Rings, or even after Lord of the Rings. Nowadays, he just hangs out, does a documentary every now and again, and flies his World War I planes. Good for him, he's earned it, but I mean, that's just what he does nowadays. Back in 96, no one could have predicted what he would end up doing with Lord of the Rings starting in 2001. Like, no one. So with this, it's interesting to see Jackson do something I would imagine that he's done before, because I mean, this is a horror comedy. Brain Dead is one of the funniest horror comedies I've ever seen. So this is definitely more in his wheelhouse. However, he did so well with Lord of the Rings, and no one would ever think that, oh yeah, Peter Jackson directed this. Like, no one thinks that. And it's a bit of a shame too, because there's plenty to like here. Again, not perfect, but there's plenty to like here. Michael J. Fox is good. Kind of similar to Jackson, it's strange to think that Michael J. Fox did really anything after Back to the Future, but he was pretty active afterwards. And even with Parkinson's, he's still active today. Good for him. I found it a little hard to buy him as a bad guy, though, because he is so likable in most of the other movies that he does. So I was just sitting there thinking, this is a weird flex to have him be this shifty, shady type, especially when, for the most part, he treats his ghost friends pretty well, or, well, business associates, I guess. But he's fine to the other ghosts, and you kind of get the sense that he is not a horrible person. I don't know. I guess maybe have someone be more cynical, more like more evil than someone like Michael J. Fox. I don't know. It's a weird criticism that I have, but it's one that I have. Tony Alvarado is great. Jeffrey Combs, the reanimator himself, steals the whole thing as an FBI agent that's pretty much one step away from being able to exist in the Twin Peaks universe. He's great. And then you got these little cameos, or not cameos, but people you would never expect, like John Aston, who is the original Gomez Addams from the Addams Family, and would go on to father Sean Astin, who would be in Lord of the Rings. So, nice little family connection there. You can definitely tell this is a Peter Jackson movie, though, if you know a little bit about his tastes and what he likes. There's plenty of that to go around here. Another big issue that I have is that it is a horror comedy. I wish it would have been just a straight horror, or perhaps even a straight comedy. I feel like Jackson may have watched Beetlejuice more than once and said, I can do that. And if it was like Beetlejuice with a harder edge, that could have been great. But this one's a pretty weird one to grade, but I am going to give this a good rating, if for nothing else, because I do love this premise, and I do think it's a great premise. But it kind of falls flat in the execution. Though acting's still good, some of the effects still hold up pretty well, some not so much, but I digress on that front. But ultimately, this is a weird one to talk about, especially when you consider that, like, directly after this production ends, he goes off and does Lord of the Rings. Like, literally, 1996, and then 2001, Fellowship of the Ring. So this is the end of an era, if you will. But now, at least for this channel, we go back to familiar territory, a movie that I have covered once before, and it's still great to this day. It's called Trainspotting.
Choose your future. Choose life.
Trainspotting was directed by Danny Boyle, who would later go on to direct 28 Days Later and Slumdog Millionaire. It's based on the book of the same name written by Irvin Welch and starred Ewan McGregor, Johnny Lee Miller, and Kelly MacDonald, among others. It tells the story of Renton, played by Ewan McGregor, who lives in a very poor and very drug-addled part of Edinburgh in Scotland. Everyone there either knows a train spotter or is a train spotter. And I'm not talking about like Thomas. I'm talking about this kind of train, especially Renton himself. However, Renton has this little part of him that wants to get clean and get out of that situation, and the movie chronicles his attempts to do so. I can't remember if this was 22 or 23, but like several years back on this channel, I covered this for my I Finally Watched series, which, mental note, get back to that at some point. I loved it then, even though it was a very hard watch, and rewatching it for the sake of this, it's still fantastic, though still pretty hard to watch. And on the second rewatch, I gained a new appreciation for it because just like with the knowledge of knowing that Ewan McGregor would go on to do great things after this, so would Kelly MacDonald, and just knowing the fact that this pretty much launched their careers. So in a weird roundabout way, it's kind of art imitating life with McGregor, because the final scene is him leaving his friends behind to do much bigger and better things. And I could be looking way too deep into it, but soon as like he leaves this and goes on to do better things, much like he leaves this indie Scottish film and goes on and does Star Wars The Phantom Menace. Again, I could be looking too deep into it, but that's what I'm taking away from it. Overall, though, just this movie, it's a ride. And it's sometimes a sad and scary ride, because you look at this and you go, this is kind of like Hotel California. You can check out any time you want, but you can never leave. Like, everyone knows everyone. Everyone knows that they're on drugs or knowing someone who uses drugs. And there's no real attempt to stop it. Like, they say, I will get clean one day, I promise. And then they just never do. And they just screw around with the rest of their lives. And it's genuinely sad to see. Because Renton especially, you see that he wants to do something more with his life, but he is just stuck in this quagmire of his life where he tries, but it just never works out for him. And when he finally does relapse, it's a brutal affair. And it's an odyssey of him trying to clean up and recollect himself. The relapse scene, or not the relapse scene, but the scene where he finally detoxes in his childhood bedroom and he sees the babies crawling on the walls and he's freaking out. Trainspotting is not a horror movie, but it's a horror movie in the sense of people go through this and you just hate to see it. I love the choose life monologue because that's the life that Renton wants. And he's trying his hardest to get. And within a paragraph, you get Renton's motivation. You don't have to dig any further than that. This movie's getting an amazing grade. I can't remember what I gave it back in the day, but it's getting an amazing grade now. It's a phenomenal movie. Mad underrated in a lot of aspects, and it gave us Ewan McGregor. So it gets points from me always. But now to close things out, we get into, in my opinion at least, one of the best legal thrillers of all time, A Time to Kill.
Yes, they deserve to die, and I hope they burn in hell.
A Time to Kill was directed by Joel Schumacher, who had previously directed movies like The Lost Boys, Flatliners, and he would later go on to direct 8mm, Flawless, and Phone Booth, and a couple of Batman movies you may have seen. This is based on the book of the same name written by John Grisham and starred Matthew McConaughey, Samuel L. Jackson, and Sandra Bullock, among many others. It tells the story of a young lawyer played by Matthew McConaughey who takes on the case of where one of the people in the town that he knows, not quite a friend yet, that's kind of the point of the movie, which I'll get to, but he's Carl Lee Haley, played by Samuel L. Jackson, takes out revenge on two white men who kidnapped and sexually assaulted his young daughter. He basically just kills him in front of a whole bunch of breathing witnesses. And so it is up to McConaughey to defend him in a court of law. Meanwhile, literally most of the town is against them. including the prosecuting attorney played by Kevin Spacey. Oh, and the KKK shows up, led by the brother of one of the killers, or the brother of one of the assaulters, played by Kiefer Sutherland. Kind of similar to what I was talking about with Peter Jackson, I feel like when Joel Schumacher made Batman and Robin, that was his legacy, weirdly enough. It's just, when that movie came out, it's like, oh, he's the Batnips guy, so therefore he is bad. I'm like, no, like, he was great always. He just made one bad comic book movie, and somehow that became his legacy. But throughout the 80s and 90s, he was moving, like Lost Boys, Flatliners, like 8mm, which came out in 99, I covered on the channel already. Like, he's done, he's sadly no longer with us, rest in peace, but he did great things before and after his Batman movies. Like Phantom of the Opera, that's another one. So he was really good at his job. And I think this might be one of the best things that he ever did, because this movie is fantastic. The movie is an investment. It's 2.5 hours long. It's funny, I was watching this on one of those double-sided DVDs, and I did not think that I needed to literally flip the DVD over to watch the rest of it. But the movie suddenly stopped. I'm like, did the disc break? And then I pull it. I'm like, oh, double-sided. And I flip it over and I watch it. McConaughey is predictably great. Honestly, I feel like he does some of his best work here, because he starts out in the movie and he's like, yep, I'm going to win this case. It's going to be great. I'm going to be set. And then a whole lot of crap happens to him, and it just humbles him up. And you just see that transformation over the course of the movie, and it's riveting to watch. Samuel L. Jackson is predictably great. Sandra Bullock is awesome. Ashley Judd in her few scenes is great. Kevin Spacey, even though he is still a garbage human being, is good in his limited role. He's not in the movie as much as you might think, but he shares a great little scene with Sandra Bullock where Sandra Bullock basically calls him impotent. It's awesome. Oliver Platt's in the movie. Charles Dutton is in the movie. Like Kiefer Sutherland, he's not in the movie super much, but he is just a genuine piece of shit in this, and you just... what happens to him is just so satisfying to watch. Even Donald Sutherland is in this movie, and he's great. Again, there's just these small little roles for these bigger actors, but they come in, they do their business, and you're just like, you're just fantastic. Even Kurtwood Smith is the leader of the Mississippi chapter of the KKK. He has literally one scene. And I don't know, maybe it was just Kurtwood Smith. Maybe it's just, I don't know. But as soon as I saw him, I'm just like, yep, when you needed someone to play a dickhead in the 90s, you called Kurtwood Smith. But what makes this movie work is that even though it's so long, you're just riveted throughout, because it's this whole question of two wrongs don't really make a right, do they? Because it's just this moral dilemma where Carly Haley basically took out revenge on a horrible deed that happened to his family, but he did a horrible thing himself. So there's no getting away clean from this. You just have to pick up the pieces and make the best of a truly horrible situation, no matter how you slice it. You watch one scene from this movie, watch the ending. The ending is just phenomenal. This is some of McConaughey's best work, because it's his closing monologue, the summation in legal speak. And he basically, like, by all accounts, he's going to lose. And so he just lets it all go. And he asks the jury to close their eyes, and he literally lays out the assault on this little girl, like, as it happens. And he is like, first they did this, then they did this, and then that's when this comes out. And you just lays it on thick, and just, you can see the jury, who up to that point had pretty much been like, yeah, we're sending this guy to the gas chamber. They just slowly start to crumble, and he's like, do it, do it, do it, do it, do. And then at the very end,
now imagine she's white.
and it's just a bombshell. Even Spacey's character, who's been smug the whole time, is like, didn't game plan for that. I can't describe it. It's just so incredible. Put it simply, if you just like McConaughey for stuff like Interstellar or his later work, he's always been great. it depends on the material. But this movie's getting an amazing grade. One of Joel Schumacher's very best, one of the best Leo thrillers ever made. Just no words. Just watch it if you haven't, or if you haven't in a while. But what did you all think of any of the movies I've talked about? You really are spoiled for choice. Let me know in the comments. I'd love to read what you have to say. And next week, I will be covering, among other things, a little bowling movie called Kingpin, which I've never seen. And I have heard nothing but great things, so fingers crossed that it's good. My name is Ryan Cam, and I'll see you in the next one.